Welcome to this session of the fourth annual English Language Conference 2026, hosted by the Queen Rania Teacher Academy and Georgia State University. It is an honor to introduce our speaker for this session, Dr. Fadi Al-Issa from Lattakia University and the Arab Academy for Science, Technology and Maritime Transport. Dr. Al-Issa brings more than 27 years of experience in English as a foreign language, English for academic purposes, and English for specific purposes, and teacher education and training. He holds advanced degrees from Syracuse University and Florida State University and has received several distinguished awards and scholarships, including the Fulbright Scholarship and the Civil Society Leadership Award. In today's presentation, titled From Withdrawal to Engagement, Rethinking ESP Courses in Arab Higher Education, Dr. Al-Issa will discuss approaches to improve student engagement and reconsidering the role of ESP courses within higher education context in the Arab world. As you listen to the presentation, please feel free to share your questions and reflections in the chat box throughout the session. We will try to leave time at the end to take some questions from participants. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Fadi Al-Issa. The floor is yours, Dr. Fadi.
Okay, thank you very much. Very much appreciated. Okay, can everyone hear me clearly? Okay, so let's see if I can share. So I know we don't have a lot of time, so let me share this. Okay, so that's not it. So just a second. I was having some technical difficulties. Okay, this is it. Excellent. Okay. So can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. So as you mentioned, I have 27 years of experience in teaching, and I've been teaching actually since 1998. And my first courses were actually ESP courses. I went into teaching without any experience and without any guidance and without any teacher methodology, because I was still a fresh graduate student, and they just told me, you're a teaching assistant, go in and teach. And that was really a huge problem for me. So I was teaching at different places at the university.
Excuse me, Dr.
Yes.
Fadi. I'm sorry, but we can see your screen, the fourth annual page for the conference. Not your
okay.
slides.
So you can. Okay, sorry about that. Okay,
No,
why is that appearing? Let me see. I don't have anything open. Let me pause. Okay, so let me pause it. Okay. What about now?
Yeah, it is working now. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So, as I said, today we're going to be talking about the problem of ESP courses at Arab Higher Education. I'm currently teaching ESP courses at the Arab Academy for Science, Technology and Maritime Transport. I've been teaching this now for like 5 years, and I've noticed a lot of withdrawals in the courses. And I've tried to read about this. I tried to look up the research and find if there's any background in Arab higher education. And unfortunately, it was so ironic that we have so many ESP courses at Arab college universities and we don't have much research on the topic or on the issue. So I decided, why not? I mean, I'm doing the teaching. I have the background in education and research. Why not start my own research on this? And that's what I actually did. So when it comes to this presentation, the outcomes that we're going to focus on, since it's a very short presentation or a workshop, we're going to do two things. One, identify key factors for withdrawal. So why are students withdrawing? And two, find a way to take action to engage students, to stop them, to prevent them from withdrawing. So hopefully these are our objectives for today, since we have a very short presentation. Okay, so when it comes to ESP programs, there are 4 pillars of ESP. So we can talk about institutional policies, we can talk about the curriculum, we can talk about teachers, we could talk about students. Now, any of these unto their own can be a barrier, can be a reason for students withdrawing, or they can be collectively reasons for students withdrawing. So when we talk about institutional policies, we're talking about institutional constraints. When we talk about curriculum, we're talking about curriculum irrelevance and linguistic challenges. When we talk about teachers, we can talk about ineffective teaching practices or complacent teachers. When we talk about students, we can talk about students with low motivation or disengaged students. Okay, so any of these, whether individually or collectively, can be a reason for student withdrawal. And these are the pillars of any ESP program. So when I did the research, this is what I found. Everyone was talking about these 4 aspects. So we have a gap. And today we're going to focus on the teachers and the students. Why? Because teachers are the bridge that connect these 3 items together, these 3 pillars together. So we're going to focus on students
I'm sorry,
and
Dr.
teachers.
Fadi. Can you
Yeah.
press slideshow?
You want
Full
slideshow?
screen? Yes, full
Okay,
screen.
okay,
Yeah, okay.
okay. So you want full screen? Let's do this. Okay, animate slideshow. And from current slide. Did that work?
No, yeah, yes, Dr. Fadi.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Okay, so when we talk about the gap, we're talking about a clear gap between what students expect and between what teachers deliver. Now, here's my question to you. If you are ESP teachers, whether you're at high school or whether you're at college level, now you do know that at high school, teachers are considered in a way ESP teachers because when students are, choose to major in science or the literary major or vocational studies, then they start taking subject-specific English, right? So in a way, that's ESP courses. So in your opinion, what kind of gap are we talking about? What do students expect? Can you write that in the chat box? What do students expect of you? Let me go back. Okay, so I think it wants to move by itself, what students want, right? Sophie, I can't see the chat box. Can you tell me if they're writing anything in the chat box, please?
Of course. Scaffolding way, getting high grades, and I already mentioned needs analysis is the first step. This could help us to know more about our learners.
Okay, exactly. That would help us learn about learners. But we're talking about what students want. What do they want? Like they want high grades, right? Unfortunately, that's that in our higher education, students are geared towards grades, right? So it's about the grade they earn, not the education they learn or they gain. So what students want, what I found out when I was talking to my students or the students where I'm teaching, students really have raised the bar, especially that we're talking to Generation Z students. So they want practical communication skills, right? So what does that mean when we talk about practical communication skills? That means they want to speak confidently in professional situations. They want to communicate in their future workplaces. They want to be able to participate in presentations. They want to understand professional terminology, right? When we talk about career preparation, what does that mean for students, career preparation? Students understand that English is very important, not just for academic purposes, but if they don't have English, they won't have any employment opportunities, and they won't be able to apply to any scholarships, and they won't receive any professional advancement. And when we talk about they want specialized topics relevant to their majors, students don't want to see general English in the classroom, right? So if we're talking about students who are majoring in engineering or architecture or IT or international logistics and stuff like that. So they want to see they want to see interactive and modern teaching. They want to see specialized topic relevant to their major. So when we talk about interactive and modern teaching, unfortunately, I haven't seen that yet in the classes in Syria because I don't see technology integration. We've heard a lot about that in the conference today, that we need to integrate technology, but it's not sufficient enough to say, like, look, I'm using the internet. I'm using, I'm telling the students to go out there and find things that are important, or just watching videos and stuff like that. That's not sufficient. That's not a sign that education is happening, right? Students want interactive discussions. They don't want to just sit silent. Students want simulations. They want project-based learning. They want authentic material. Students right now look at their books and see that, there's general information. There are just exercises, stuff like that. But there isn't really authentic material that is related to their field of study. And of course, they want fluency and confidence. They want to be able to speak fluently. They want confidence building. They want to be able to speak publicly, especially when it comes to work. Like, so if they go to an interview, they want to feel relaxed when they are talking about the field of their study, what they have. So that's in relation to students, what students want. That's when I interviewed the students and I asked them, like, what do you want in the beginning of the research? These are the topics that came up. Now, the question is, what do teachers deliver? Before I go to the next slide, can you write in the chat? Since we're talking about a gap, now we know what students expect from ESP courses. But what do teachers deliver in order for this gap to be there, And Subhi, if you could read what they are writing in the chat, I would be very much.
Tara mentioned how they can acquire the language, and Fatima said language practice. I see lecture-based lessons.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's what's happening right now. That is what's happening in ESP classes, at universities. So teachers go in. If the students are fortunate enough, they have an experienced teacher. If they're not fortunate enough, they might have a teacher who is newly appointed. And as I said, there are not many courses out there that actually prepare teachers to become ESP teachers, right? So we know that there are like TESOL, there's CELTA, there's TEFL. There are those kind of courses that teach general English, but they don't teach English for specific purposes. So when teachers go into the classroom, they automatically go into, the automatic teaching. What is that? They start explaining the grammar. They go into details, although our high schools have done a great job in explaining the grammar. In fact, one of the things that I saw when I was in the United States is that usually students who come from an Arab background, an Arab university, an Arab high school, they are excellent in grammar, but then don't have the communication skills. So teachers go in, they start explaining the grammar, they start translating the difficult words, they focus a lot on memorization, they focus on following the exercises in the textbooks, they provide students with vocabulary lists and like synonyms, antonyms. There's a lot of reading going on and stuff like that. So that's what's happening. That's what's happening.
I'm sorry, but
yes.
Yeah, this is what Intisar mentioned. She said students usually receive curriculum rather than language experience or real life scenarios.
Exactly. And Twain once said, "Don't let schooling get in the way of your education." Right? So schooling is one thing and education is something else. And unfortunately, what we are doing right now is schooling, which is following exactly what everyone expects us to do. And we're talking here about, the instructional policies, like what does the university administration want us to do, right? What does the department want us to do? They want us to cover the curriculum. They want us to stay focused on what's in the textbook, because we have a certain amount of time and we have a large number of students. Like sometimes I have 40 students in my classroom, right? And that's a large number for an ESP classroom, for example, right? So that's what we said. We have traditional teaching, unfortunately. And then we have, when you have traditional teaching, automatically you're going to get teacher-centered classrooms, right? So it's going to be lecture-based because the teacher is going to say, I have a lot of time restriction and I am required to finish the textbook. And there are certain like quizzes that the students, certain amounts of the curriculum of the textbook that the student needs to be quizzed on. And then there's the final test, right? So, and that, when you follow a teacher-centered classroom, you're going to get limited authentic materials. What does that mean? And that's really a huge criticism that right now I've voiced this to the people in charge. Like, you know, here we have these textbooks, but we don't really have authentic material. So why don't we bring in workplace documents? So if I'm teaching international transport and logistics, for example, or I'm teaching English for business, why don't I bring in contracts and have students look at them and see how they are completed or filled out? Why don't I bring in third-party logistics documents and have students see what they look like? Why don't I bring in custom clearance documents and have students fill those documents out, right? Why is it there's only terminology, there's definition of the terminology, and then there is a reading that brings in this terminology and that's it? Why are there no dialogues? Why are there no conversations that actually, you know, motivate the students to speak the terminology, to talk, to voice their ideas when it comes to using these specific words or these specific structures? Unfortunately, limited authentic materials is a huge problem that teachers do not deliver. And of course, at the end, when you ask the teachers, like I did when I interviewed the teachers, and I said, why don't you try to bring in, you know, just fill in the gaps, fill in the things that are missing from the textbook? And the answer is, well, because at the end, we can't quiz the students or we can't ask them questions about things that are not relevant to the textbook. And that's because everything is assessment focused, right? Everything is focused on summative assessments. You have the final exam. Everyone is focusing on grammar accuracy, on memorization, and that really causes frustration. Okay, so the question here that I have for you guys, and I would like you to write that in the chat, is, you know, now we know what students expect, and we know what teachers deliver. How do you think this plays out in the classroom? What are the consequences of this gap in the classroom? Can you think of certain consequences that the students might face due to this gap between expectation and deliverance? Subhi, would you be able to read the chat if there's anything in there?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Farah mentioned scaffolding.
Okay. Okay, so that would be one way around it, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the consequences, the results. How would this
Yeah.
impact the classroom?
Yeah, Fatima said less motivation, and Badr mentioned more spoon-fed students. Sarah mentioned feedback. Maybe she means they need fruitful feedback. I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so some consequences. I was observing the classrooms when so I went in and observed some classrooms as the teaching was going on, and watching this gap grow and grow day by day, class by class. So the first thing that I saw due to this mismatch between expectation and delivery was, as you just mentioned, low motivation, and that is really devastating. When there's low motivation, that means students are losing interest, especially when they feel that their courses are irrelevant to their needs and irrelevant to their future careers. And what happens to the students? Either they're going to attend the class only to pass it as a grade because it's a mandatory class and they have to pass it in order to graduate, or they're going to take the short way out, which is withdraw from the class. And that's the huge problem that I'm focusing on. So low motivation leads to withdrawal. Then the second thing is we're going to have weak communication skills. What does that mean? Students, students may pass the quiz, students may pass the exam, but does that mean they are able to communicate using the terminology? No, because they didn't practice communication. They didn't communicate professionally. They didn't participate in the class. They didn't use workplace documents, authentic material. And if you don't use authentic material, there is no way that you can prepare the students for their future in a professional way. Because if you have general English and students are just learning the general things, the grammar, the writing and stuff like that, the reading, but they don't know how to deal with the documents, with workplace documents. They don't know how to deal with clients. They don't know how to write professional emails and stuff. They don't know how to do presentations. Like one thing that I've asked my students to prepare after the Eid holiday, I told them that you're going to do presentations. You have to prepare a presentation on one of the topics that you are interested in. And they were like, what? Nobody ever asked us to do something like that. Why are you requiring that? Well, because that's one thing that usually you do when you are in a company, when you work, you make presentations. And then you're going to have anxiety and lack of confidence. And that's a killer for students, right? So students, when they know that they don't have sufficient speaking practice, students, they fear speaking when it comes to English. They will have a communication anxiety because they have low self-esteem, they have low self-confidence, or they have no confidence at all. And that is really a huge problem. When students become worried, the next thing they're going to do is they're going to withdraw from the class. When they lack confidence, they know that they will not be able to continue the class, then the next thing they're going to do is withdraw from the class. So these are some of the consequences that actually lead to students' withdrawal from class. Now, based on this information, what I have for you now is scenario one, and this is a real scenario. So from the students that I actually interviewed. So as you can see here, if you could read the scenario, it says student A is studying computer engineering, right? He stopped attending his ESP courses after 1 month. He found the content irrelevant and felt classes were lecture heavy. So based on the information that we just talked about, based on the gap, based on the consequences, can you identify some reasons that caused this student to withdraw from the class? If you could write in the chat, like one word or a verb. What are some reasons that caused this student studying computer engineering to withdraw only after 1 month? Based on this very short thing.
Yeah, both Thara and Fatima agree that ignoring students' need, and Badr mentioned low motivation.
Okay, exactly. I mean, the student said, here it says that the content is irrelevant. So that's one of the first things, right? The student has realized is that they're spending time on learning something that will not help them in their future profession. So to them right now, that taking this course is not one of their necessities. Why should they waste time on taking a course that will not benefit them? So they found that the course was irrelevant. The course content was irrelevant. Motivation, right? So if students, when they major at the university, they major because they want to have, a career in this field. So if they don't see that the course content is relevant to their career, to their future career, then it doesn't have professional value. And then engagement and attendance is going to decline. And then it says the students said it was lecture heavy. That means the teacher was doing all the talking, which is a traditional teaching approach, right? So if the teacher
this is what Duha, this is what Duha mentioned. She said too many goals the teacher want to achieve in single class. Abir also said the teacher uses traditional teaching. Osman mentioned the lack of communication, no interactive lessons. And
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So when the student is saying that the content is irrelevant, that means the teacher is not attempting to reduce the gap in the material. The teacher is not bringing any authentic material into the classroom, right? Which means that this is going to be teacher-centered instruction because it only depends on the textbook. And the textbook is all exercises. They move from exercise 1 to 2 to 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. And that's it. And students get bored with this kind of lecture-heavy classrooms. Okay, so the question here, can you think of certain intervention? What are some interventions that we could have done if the teacher had realized that this student was going to withdraw? Can you think of some interventions that the teacher could have done to prevent the student from withdrawing? Can you write in the chat? What intervention could have been possible that would have maybe persuaded the student to continue the class? Is anyone writing in the chat, Subhi?
Yes. I think Bilal mentioned bringing reality to classrooms.
Okay.
Making it, or Hood also mentioned making it more relevant and up to date. Asil said ask for continuous feedback. Haifa also mentioned reduce the material. Fatima think if we make it objective. And Abir said give students more activities. Evaluate the students' level. And yeah.
Exactly. So one thing that one intervention that would be good would be actually to ask students how English is used in their future careers, right? So as an ESP teacher, we're supposed to master the English language, but we don't really have that kind of mastery when it comes to different subjects, right? So we're not equipped with information about architecture or mechanical engineering or information technology or business administration, stuff like that, right? Those are subject teachers that master that kind of information. We're supposed to teach that information in English context, right? So one thing we could do is we could learn what the students actually want. So when you're facing a business administration student or a computer engineering student, you might ask them, like, how is English used in your field? What are the things that you focus on in your field, right? And then you could start bring in, just like they said, bring in the real world, right? So when you ask the students how English is going to be used in their field, then you could bring in authentic material. Like, for example, you could bring in advertisements about jobs that require English proficiency. So you could say, oh, okay, this is an advertisement for a position for a computer engineer. This is an advertisement for somebody who's going to work in a company, and so on. And you could say, well, these are the requirements, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you're bringing in the real world, the real vocab. You could include project-based learning, right? Linked to their jobs, to their field, to their market, and so on. So these are some kind of interventions that can be used. Okay, take a look at this second one. This is scenario 2. What is going on in this scenario? Let me take a sip of water while you think and write what is going on. Why do you think this student decided to withdraw from their class? Okay, any information in the chat, Subhi?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
Thara mentioned the way of mastering the language itself. It depends on the field that we focused on it.
Okay.
Some have also said the student struggles to adapt academically. Or who would say no real purpose of using the language. The student doesn't see that value.
Okay. Okay, so these are excellent things. I mean, the things that they just put into the chat are really wonderful. However, they're missing something. This is a student, this is a freshman student, right? Who came in from high school to first year. So one thing that teachers need to focus on when they are dealing with freshman students or first year students is that they need to help the students make the shift from a school mentality to a college mentality, right? So here it seems that the student is still within the mentality of school, the way they teach English at school, what is required from them when it comes to English at school. And then they came in and saw something different at college level. They were not able to cope with it. So the teacher failed to help the student make that transition from school to college. And actually, not only that, we also need to help them make another transition, which is from school to profession, right? So because they're going to graduate at a certain point, and then they're going to go into the market, into the real world. So there are two transitions that we need to help students make. So here the teacher failed to help the student make that transition. And two, weak academic English foundation. The teacher failed to realize what the students is capable of, right? And that's why there's no critical reading skills, that the students doesn't have academic vocabulary, the student doesn't know how to do note-taking strategies, and they usually end up, like one of the students, I asked the student, why did you withdraw? And he said, well, after the lecture, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this information, right? So the lecture is over, we did all the exercises, and then what? So what am I supposed to do with this, information? And then the student, one of the other reasons says that the student failed the quizzes, right? So as you know, as Arabs, we always like to save face. We don't like to appear weak. And so early poor grades can lead to students struggling later on and thus withdrawing from classes. So unfortunately, these two situations are realistic. These are not imagined. These are two students that I actually interviewed, and these were the reasons why they withdrew from class. Now we come to the second thing. Now, these two scenarios share a similarity, which is lack of engagement. Lack of engagement. The students didn't feel engaged. The teacher was not able to motivate the students to participate in the class. Did not motivate them to take action in class, to become active. Now, here's my question to you. Since you are all teachers, how does engagement look like in your classrooms? How do you know that your students are engaged? Are there certain pointers? Can you write in the chat? What does engagement look like in your classroom? How can you tell your students are engaged with your teaching? Anything interesting, Subhi?
Yeah, I mean, Said, questioning the content we are teaching. By the way, Dr. Fadi, we have about 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have one more slide.
Ahud said interaction. Fatima mentioned through their reactions, and Rania by using formative assessment.
Okay.
Samah also mentioned their attention fully to me and to the class. Students feel safe participating and making mistakes. Effective interaction. This is what Bilal said.
Exactly. They're not afraid to make mistakes. And I think that's one of the most important things. Once you realize that your students participate without the fear of making mistakes, that means you have been able to engage them, right? So there are many signs that show that students are engaged. So if students are listening actively, if students are maintaining eye contact with you, if there are limited interruptions, if students look relaxed when you are providing them with the information, they're not worried about making the mistakes. And then you could also look at the nonverbal cues, right? Students are nodding their heads with what you are saying. You could see their facial reactions. Are they surprised with the information? Do they want to learn more? Are they asking questions? And do they perform the required tasks? I mean, some students are not willing to take part in class, which means they are disengaged. Some students' facial reactions are like, not again. That means they are disengaged. Some students just look worried all the time. That means they are disengaged. So these small things that you know tell us that our students are actually engaged with what we are doing as teachers. If you see these signs, then that means you have succeeded in engaging your students. If you see your students having side talks with the person sitting next to them, or fumbling with their mobile phone, or just going through their bags, that means they're just trying to keep their minds off the class. So engagement is very important. Now, finding solutions. This is the last slide. So now you're going to say, okay, Fadi, we know this. Yes, we know this. These are the general things that make any class interactive. But unfortunately, do we do them? Do we have the time to do them? Unfortunately, many of us don't. Like conduct needs analysis. When I go into any class, the start of the semester, I always ask my students to write 2 different paragraphs. One general, the other specific to their field of study. And that way I would learn something about what they aspire to be, what they aspire to learn, what they like, what they dislike, and stuff like that, their strengths, their weaknesses, and stuff like that. So we need to know the students' current state and goals, what they know, what they need to learn. Disciplinary communication needs, such as field-specific writing, terminology, argumentation to provide, critique, share knowledge effectively, industry expectations, what they expect from this class. So needs analysis tells us how we need to deal with these students. The second thing, which we talked about earlier, use authentic material. It's always okay to bend the rules. I know we have a textbook to follow, but that doesn't mean that we can't bring in authentic materials. Bring in real workplace communication, bring in case studies, professional reports, show videos, do simulations, right? Have discipline-specific tasks. So, role plays and stuff like that. So all of these things help students acquire the language much better, and then shift toward student-centered learning. That way you would have interaction, collaboration, problem solving, role play activities, projects, and stuff like that. And finally, align assessment with real skills. So to encourage students, your assessment should it shouldn't evaluate just what they know, the grammar, or what they memorized, right? It should also evaluate their communication ability, their practical use of the language, their ability to do presentations, their professional writings. Students need to feel that they are rewarded for their active role in learning, rather than merely being graded on the final exam, right? So unfortunately, that's what happens. At the end, what is our grade? What did we take in the final exam? But what about what did we do during the semester? What did we learn during the semester? How were we graded during the semester? And stuff like that. So my final words is, we need to create pathways for students' growth rather than highways for their withdrawal. That's my final sentence for today. And I think I was within the limit, right, Subhi?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Al-Issa, for this insightful and thought-provoking presentation. I think we now have time for only one question from participants. So if you would like to participate, please feel free to share your question. I honestly have a question. It could be a broad question,
Okay, go
but
ahead.
my MA research focused on ESP, and I'm currently moving more into teacher education. So I would like to ask how teacher education programs can better prepare educators to address the specific needs and context of ESP learners.
That is an excellent question. When I did the research to see if there are programs that actually prepare teachers for ESP learning, I was surprised that we don't have these kinds of programs. And The question is, why haven't they tried to prepare teachers for ESP? I mean, all universities, internationally speaking, have ESP courses. And most of the teachers in the ESP courses are either, like, let's say, native speakers, but being a native speaker does not make you qualified to become an ESP instructor. Or they are graduates of the English department, and that by itself doesn't make you qualified to become an ESP instructor. Now, I was able to find, I think there was like only one institute, and then it had like a list of like 30 or 40 different majors, right? And it said, if you want to become an ESP instructor in one of these majors, we can help you. So the problem with ESP is that it's so branched out. You can't fixate it and say, I'm going to give you one technique that you can apply in the different majors. So if you're teaching like, let's say, architecture, and then you're teaching computer engineering and business administration and maritime engineering, right? You can't teach them the same idea in the same way, because each one of these disciplinaries have their own terminology, have their own use of language, and they prioritize what kind of discourse goes into the language, the kind of context where the language is used for. And that is why I think they haven't been able to establish courses where they actually prepare ESP teachers. I mean, there aren't even courses where they can support ESP teachers. And I think that's why, I tried to reach out to some universities in the Gulf and MENA, to the ESP programs to see what's happening with their students and their teachers. Unfortunately, I didn't get any reply, but I'm guessing it's the same thing, right? So I think what you're doing right now, doing a master's in ESP, I think this would be very, very important. And I would wish that we could connect, and I would like to see what you're going to find in the master's, because I think it's going to be a valuable asset for ESP teaching.
Okay. Thank you again, Dr. Al-Issa, for sharing your expertise and experience with us today. And thanks to everyone for your active participation throughout the session. Thank you all for being part of the 4th Annual English Language Conference 2026. We truly appreciate your participation and engagement throughout the conference.